And so I think one of the problems that we had discussed, getting your solution, is pricing. Pricing
Yeah.
is always an issue in all businesses. Is
Mhm.
you've got to find that sweet spot where you're not pricing something so low that you're actually losing money because you make it up on volume, right? And when two negatives don't make a positive, or
Right.
you're overpriced and your price is just not realistic with your market. Can you talk a little bit about that problem and the solution that you've come up with?
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I think I'm going to go back one step, if that's okay with you, and just give them a little framework of where I come from, because
Yeah,
maybe they're thinking, oh, this guy works with attorneys. So what relevance is it going to have to me? You all right if I go back a little
perfect.
bit and tell a little bit
Please
of my
do.
history?
Yep.
Yeah. So, I come from, I cut my teeth in the insurance industry, in the late 80s. And I learned how to sell. And that was very good for me. It has served me well through the years. And then from there, I went into the family business. My grandfather passed away. He was the third generation of a family business in the funeral business. And the fourth generation, my uncle asked me to come into the business, and I did. And I bought my first funeral home by the time I was 25, and I had my third funeral home by the time I was 28. And by most people's standards, I was successful, although I didn't have a life. I never took a vacation without my bag phone, not a cell phone, but a bag phone. And I never was kind of off call. I was on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But I did love that business. But I loved insurance and marketing more, and I couldn't figure out how to put a buy one, get one free on the side of the funeral home and like get any real results. So I ended up buying a pet supply company of all things. And I invested all my money that I was going to go buy another funeral home into a pet supply company. And we specialized in aquarium stuff like boats, bridges, and castles that went inside of fish tanks. And we grew that business rapidly. We had 3,000 to 4,000 clients throughout the world that we sold these products to, and we had manufacturers in China. And then in around 2007, 2008, like everybody else, and the recession hit, was my first recession as a business owner. I got the wind knocked out of us. Right, we found out that fish weren't as cool as cats and dogs. Fish don't fetch. And so when there was a recession, people were going to stop buying aquarium stuff, I guess, and that's what happened. And we kind of lost our shirt. Literally, we had to start all over again. And it was just by happenstance that I ran into a fellow who worked with attorneys, and he asked me if I can help him with his business, meaning his own business, his consulting firm. And I did, and it worked. And he said, hey, do you think this stuff would work for lawyers? And I said, I don't see why not. And so I started teaching lawyers how to do this. And then one lawyer saw me speak from stage and said, hey, I'm starting a new firm. Would you like to try out all your crazy ideas? And I said, sure, why not? He said, well, here's what's going to happen. He goes, you try all your crazy ideas, and if it works, you get to tell the world about it. And if it doesn't, you get to fail miserably in a public forum. And I'm like, all right, well, let's see if it works. And so
No pressure.
no pressure. And I went for it. I took the chance, and we built that firm from him and I literally sharing a desk. Like, we literally shared a desk. He was on one side, I was on the other side, in an executive suite, to $3.5 million in annual gross sales in just a couple of years. Now, that's a cool story, but the real cool part of the story is that guy also was able to take a vacation for the first time in his life, like left for a month to go to Turks and Caicos with his family. And he was able to do that because the business was running on systems. And the primary reason why that was able to work was because one of the things that we got right was pricing. Now, it's real important when we talk about pricing, we identify what we're talking about. When I was in the insurance business in the late 80s, I couldn't do a lot to affect my pricing. My prices were set by the insurance carriers, by the underwriters, by the mortality tables. There was things I couldn't do to affect price. And so I really didn't affect price. And so if we're talking about a commodity or a government-based scenario or an insurance-based scenario, you might not be able to affect price in the traditional manner. So we're going to put that conversation in the parking lot. We can address it, but we're not going to have time to address it here today. But in the funeral business, when I grew up, I watched my uncle when he got the price increase, in January for the caskets in the vaults. All I heard, he just clapped his hands and he said, all right, we got a raise. And I go, wait, what do you mean the prices went up? He goes, yeah, prices went up. He goes, but I have a markup on percentage. He goes, their prices went up. I had my markup on the based on percentage. We made more money this year. I'm like, okay, cool. I get it. I understand. It's okay to raise prices. And so, when I bought my first funeral homes, one of the first things I did was increase prices and increase my, not only my service charge, but also the prices on the caskets. And people would say to me, well, how did you know? Like, what if your competitors were charging less? And, back then, and I think it's still the rule today, the federal government said that you could walk into any funeral home and ask for their pricing guide, and they had to give it to you. It's a law. It had like some crazy fine, like a $10,000 fine if you didn't give them your general price list. And so I said, all right, well, I'm going to go around to every funeral home in town and get their prices. And I did. And I literally just walked to my competitors and go, you got to give me your price list. And they knew they couldn't do anything about it. So they gave me all their prices. And then I proceeded to take all of their prices and find the highest price guy and make my prices 10% higher. And I just wanted to make sure that we were going to give the best service. We were going to be the highest priced firm in the area. Now, that's contradictory to most people's thinking, because they want to be like the average of everybody else, or they think they need to be the lowest price of everybody else, or people won't do business with them. And we did business with families over and over and over again, generation after generation, and they never once balked about the price. And so that brings my first point, Mike and Kat. In order to get pricing right, it has to start right here. We have to be willing to understand that we sell value. Now, if we're just raising prices because, like my uncle said, ooh, we get a raise. Now, that was cool. It was a nice story. But the reality is that wasn't the only reason why my uncle knew he had to raise prices. See, he had to raise prices because if he didn't raise prices and his costs went up, which all of our costs go up in different ways based on the business that we're in, his ability to service client was going to either squeeze out his profit, or he was going to make it so he couldn't serve his client as well. And so he needed to make sure he had the proper profit in place in order to make sure that he served his clients well. In addition, if you're going to run advertising or marketing campaigns, it gets harder and harder to do some of that stuff, and sometimes more and more expensive. And if you really believe you're the best at what it is that you do, like Mike, Kat, I assume you guys believe you're the best firm at what it is you do in your area. Is that a fair statement?
That's right.
Yeah. So if you believe that you're the best at what it is that you do, then in my opinion, what we need to do is ensure that everybody in your area who needs your services chooses you. Well, in order to do that, I have to have the profit to be able to market into the community so they know I exist, so they can hear my unique competitive advantage. And so I believe that if we get our minds right, we'll know that profit leads to helping more people. See, if we believe what we do will really help people and we create value in this world, which is a kind of, in my opinion, entry into the game, like the ante to get to the poker table, then what we want to be able to do is help as many of them as possible. And if we can help as many of them as we possibly can by being massively profitable, then that's the path I want to be on. Is this making sense?
Oh, yeah,
It's
definitely.
fantastic.
And I like what you're saying about you've got to get it in your mind, because I know a lot of my colleagues, both in the Richard James Group and just out everywhere, you've got to be able to say what your price is and believe it.
That's
you
right.
can't just say, well, today it's going to be this. You've got to know what you're worth, and you've got to be able to say it solidly and confidently, and you can't waver from it. So, knowing your worth, it starts in your mind.
Yeah. So Mike, I'm glad you said that. I mean, when you're sitting across that table and whether it be virtual now or a physical table, you've got to have the confidence to be able to say that number. And in the early days, here's what's going to happen. Because it happened to me and it happens to everybody else. You say that price and you're so tempted to want to retract it and want to justify it somehow. And you just got to have the nerves of steel to say the price and then shut up and let them answer. Right. And it's amazing what happens when they'll say, oh yeah, no big deal. Or worse, they'll go, oh, I thought it was going to be a lot more than that. Oh my goodness. That's the worst thing anybody could ever say to me. Matter of fact, that's happened. Michael and I are launching a business now. And in the early days when we were doing the beta pricing, one of the first one or two clients goes, man, I thought it was going to be a heck of a lot more than that. I'm like, well, Michael, you know what that means? prices have to
You
go
go
up, right?
up.
So,
Yes.
you know, so that's that telltale sign.